The rain had ceased, yet the streets remained glistening with moisture, mirroring the luminous city lights. Andrew Holmes entered the quaint little cafe, anticipating merely a swift coffee stop before returning to his duties. Just as he extended his hand toward his phone, a soft sniffle drew his focus. He turned, noticing a small boy by the corner, his tousled blonde hair and shimmering blue eyes filled with unshed tears. Andrew was not the type of person to engage in the troubles of others he didn't know. Yet there was something in the child's demeanor, that look of longing in his eyes, the way he held his small hands tightly together, that caused him to stop in his tracks. Then the boy gazed up at him and murmured, "I can't find my mommy." Andrew felt a constriction in his chest. Unbeknownst to him, in just a few moments, everything he knew was on the brink of transformation. The rain ceased an hour prior, leaving the streets moist and the atmosphere heavy with the aroma of damp pavement and freshly brewed coffee. Andrew Holmes never intended to find himself in this situation. He seldom stepped into quaint cafes such as this, favoring the polished, corporate vibe of the upscale venues his peers often visited. Today had been a draining day, packed with consecutive meetings, and for once, he craved a serene moment away from the imposing confines of his office. Upon entering, he was greeted by the rich aroma of roasted coffee beans mingling with a hint of sweetness that enveloped the space. The cafe exuded a quaint charm, featuring an array of mismatched chairs and warm yellow lights that created a gentle ambience for the few patrons scattered at their tables. Andrew was lost in his own world as he fished out his phone, planning to glance at his emails while he waited for his order. At that moment, he became aware of it. A faint, subdued cry. Initially, he brushed it aside. The city buzzed with a cacophony of sounds, as hurried footsteps mingled with overlapping dialogues, while the faint murmur of traffic lingered in the background. Yet, this was unlike anything else. The atmosphere was serene, almost concealed, as if there was an effort to remain unseen. Andrew tilted his head just enough to catch sight of a tiny silhouette lingering by the cafe's corner. A small boy, perhaps not more than 4 years old, stood by himself, his little hands clutching the edge of a wooden table. His tousled blonde hair framed his face, while his striking blue eyes, which held an uncanny resemblance to something from the past, shimmered with unfallen tears. He cast furtive glances, his lower lip quivering as though he was making a tremendous effort to hold back tears. Andrew scowled. Something felt off. A solitary boy stood by himself. No grown-up loomed in the vicinity, no guardian keeping an eye on him. Despite his reservations, Andrew tucked his phone into his pocket and approached. He didn't have a natural affinity for children. He didn't have any strong feelings against them, but he also hadn't really been in their company for long. His existence revolved around commerce, precision, and mastery. This circumstance was far from any of those descriptions. He lowered himself, careful not to frighten the boy. "Greetings, my friend. Are you all right?" The boy jumped a bit, his blue eyes growing wide as he gazed up at Andrew. For a brief instant, he appeared hesitant to respond, his tiny hands gripping the edge of the table with increasing tension. Andrew lowered his tone. "Are you accompanied by anyone?" The young lad paused, a soft whimper escaping him. "My mother." Andrew surveyed his surroundings once more. Where could she be? The boy's lip trembled, and this time, a tear cascaded down. I'm uncertain." His voice was soft, almost lost in the air. "She is gone from my life." Andrew experienced an unforeseen sensation knotting in his chest. The boy felt a deep sense of fear, a genuine terror that gripped him. He wasn't merely waiting for his mother, he was adrift. "All right," Andrew replied softly. "May I ask for your name?" The young lad dabbed at his eyes with the cuff of his tiny jacket. "Olivier." Andrew gave a slight nod. "What a fantastic name. All right, Olivier, let's work through this together. Can you recall the last time you were with your mom?" Olivier swiftly shook his head. "She was engaged in her tasks. She instructed me to remain at the back, but boredom got the better of me, and now I seem to have lost track of her. His voice wavered at the end, as if he feared he had committed a grave mistake. Andrew's jaw clenched. She was busy, which indicated she must be somewhere in the cafe. He rose to his feet and faced the counter, where a barista was engaged in taking an order from a customer. Andrew moved closer, softly resting his hand on Olivier's shoulder in a gesture of comfort. "Excuse me," Andrew stated, his tone steady yet assertive. "This young lad is adrift. He mentioned that his mother is employed here. Could you assist in locating her?" The barista's eyes sparkled with surprise as she looked down at Olivier. "Alas! That is the child of Lily." She pivoted to face the rear of the cafe and elevated her voice. "Lily! Hurry up!" The sound of footsteps echoed from the employee entrance at the rear of the cafe. Andrew hardly had a moment to absorb the situation when a woman burst in, her face a mask of urgency as she scanned the room frantically. In that moment, she became utterly still. Her eyes found Olivier first, her whole being relaxing with a sense of relief. Yet, in that fleeting moment, her gaze rose and caught his. Andrew froze in place. He recognized those eyes. Such a visage. That voice, when she breathed in softly, taken aback by surprise. Before him stood Lillian Brooks. The woman who had disappeared from his existence 4 years prior. The woman who had once been his entire world. The woman now cradled a little boy with striking blue eyes. Lillian Brooks found herself gasping for air. In that fleeting moment, the sheer joy of discovering her son unharmed eclipsed all other thoughts. She knelt down, enveloping Olivier in her embrace, her fingers gently tracing through his hair and across his cheeks, ensuring he was safe and sound. "You frightened me, darling," she murmured, placing a gentle kiss on his forehead. "I instructed you to remain at the rear." Olivier sniffled yet held on to her tightly. "I apologize, mother. I had no intention of doing that." She breathed out unsteadily, gripping him more firmly. Yet, in that moment, she lifted her gaze. And that was the moment when the burden of reality descended upon her. Andrew Holmes stood directly before her. Her chest constricted, breath snagging in her throat. 4 years had passed since their last encounter, yet he appeared unchanged, dressed in a sharp suit, his piercing blue eyes still captivating, and that unmistakable presence that seemed to shrink the space around him as he entered. Yet, there was an unmistakable shift in the way he gazed at her in that moment. It was more than mere astonishment. It was more than mere disbelief. It was an awakening. He had encountered Olivier. He cast a glance in his direction. He had assembled the fragments into a coherent whole. In a moment that stretched into eternity, silence enveloped them both. Andrew's eyes darted between her and the boy nestled in her embrace, his jaw clenched, his whole frame rigid with tension. At last, his voice pierced the heavy stillness. "Does he belong to me?" Lillian felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. She had envisioned this moment countless times throughout the years, contemplating the words she would choose if their paths crossed once more. She had assured herself that she was ready for it. Yet, in this moment, with Andrew before her and his son cradled in her arms, an overwhelming wave of emotion threatened to engulf her. Olivier, oblivious to the tempest gathering among the grown-ups, tilted his head ever so slightly. "Mother?" Lillian took a deep breath. "Olivier, darling, could you please take a seat over there for a moment? I'll be with you shortly." He paused for a moment, then nodded, rubbing his eyes as he settled into one of the nearby cafe chairs. Once he was out of earshot, Andrew moved in closer, his voice dropping to a lower yet equally intense tone. "Answer me, please." Lillian's fingers clenched tightly, her whole being urging her to flee. Yet, there remained no place to turn. She compelled herself to meet his gaze. "Indeed," she murmured. "He belongs to you." Andrew gasped, as though she had struck him. Lillian observed the tempest brewing within him, the gradual deceleration of his breath, and the tightening of his hands at his sides as he grappled with the reality before him. She was uncertain of the response she had anticipated, but when he finally spoke, it was not one of anger. It was something far more dreadful. "You never mentioned it," he said, his voice soft, nearly inscrutable. "For years, Lily." She recoiled at the mention of the name. It had been ages since anyone had referred to her that way. She paused, coming to the unsettling realization that words eluded her. No justifications could erase her actions. Andrew raked his fingers through his hair, each motion precise and taut. "What is the reason?" Lillian briefly shut her eyes. She needed to regain her composure. She needed to clarify. Fear gripped her, she confessed, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "Your attention was entirely devoted to your profession, your organization, and the creation of your legacy. We were already unraveling when I discovered I was expecting, Andrew. You expressed quite explicitly that family was not a priority for you. I believed that by sharing this with you, you would provide financial assistance, but nothing beyond that." Andrew's demeanor shifted to one of gloom. "So you took it upon yourself to decide for me?" Lillian felt a constriction in her throat. "I believed I was acting in his best interest." He emitted a brief, mirthless chuckle. "What stood out the most? Do you really believe that holding on to my own son was the right choice?" Lillian averted her gaze. Andrew let out a sharp breath, his hands resting on his hips as he turned slightly, attempting to steady himself. For a brief interlude, silence enveloped them both. The atmosphere was thick with unease. Then, all at once, his voice took on a serene quality. Yet, there was an underlying strength to it. "I wish to understand him better." Lillian's head jerked upward. "Excuse me." Andrew gazed at her, his cerulean eyes steady and resolute. "I desire to understand him better. I wasted 4 years, Lily. I refuse to experience any more losses." Fear seized her. She had devoted so much time to maintaining the divide in their lives, persuading herself that her choices were justified. Yet here she was, confronted by the man she had once cherished, witnessing the turmoil that had engulfed his life. In that moment, she understood that she was utterly unprepared for what lay ahead. "Andrew, I'm not asking," he cut in, his tone resolute yet gentle. "He is my son, and I will be involved in his life. Regardless of your preferences." Lillian gazed at him, her heart racing. She felt compelled to engage in a debate. She was determined to battle. Yet, beneath the surface, she understood he was correct. Once, she had stripped him of his choice. She found herself unable to attempt it once more. At last, she let out a breath, her shoulders drooping in resignation. "Understood." Andrew gave a single nod. It was not about forgiveness. It wasn't a solution. Yet, it marked the beginning. Andrew hardly found rest that night. His thoughts raced uncontrollably, each one crashing into the next in a chaotic whirlwind. He entered the cafe with the simple intention of enjoying a brief coffee break, seeking a fleeting moment of tranquility before plunging back into his tasks. Instead, he had left with the knowledge that he had a son. A child he had never known, a child he had never had the opportunity to cherish, a child who had spent 4 years maturing in his absence. As dawn broke, he found clarity in his thoughts and resolved to take action. He was determined not to let another day slip by without discovering more about Olivier. He had already squandered far too much time. He reached the cafe ahead of schedule, his anxiety revealing itself in a manner it never had previously. He had sealed billion-dollar deals with ease, embraced business risks that could have jeopardized everything, yet none of it matched the uncertainty he faced in this moment. Encountering his own son shouldn't evoke a sense of unfamiliarity, yet it undeniably did. As he entered, his gaze instinctively sought them out. Lillian had arrived first, seated at a quaint table by the window, with Olivier at her side. The young lad dangled his feet beneath the chair, his attention fixed on the stack of pancakes awaiting him. Andrew compelled himself to inhale deeply before moving ahead. Lillian raised her gaze initially, her demeanor cautious yet composed. She had hardly uttered a word since consenting to his involvement in Olivier's life, and now, as she observed him, he sensed that she was still grappling with whether she had made the correct choice. Olivier looked up next, his mouth still stuffed with pancake. He stared at Andrew for a moment, then gulped down hard. "You returned," he remarked, his tone laced with astonishment. Andrew felt a constriction in his chest at the sheer innocence of the statement. Did he really believe he wouldn't? Had he already come to understand that people often do not remain? "I told you I would," Andrew remarked, as he drew out the chair opposite them. "I honor my commitments." Olivier scrutinized him, weighing the truth of his words. He nodded, a look of satisfaction crossing his face at the response. Lillian adjusted her posture, clearing her throat as she settled into her chair. "We were simply enjoying our breakfast. I was uncertain about the time of your arrival. I had no intention of arriving late." Andrew cast a quick look at Olivier's plate before shifting his gaze to the additional one resting nearby. "Have you placed the order for me?" Lillian paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. I wasn't certain if you would desire anything." Olivier, on the other hand, appeared to possess unwavering confidence. "Feel free to take some of mine," he said, nudging his plate a bit closer. "Mother says that sharing is beneficial." Andrew's lips curled slightly, a hint of humor breaking the seriousness of the moment. "She is correct." He lifted a fork and took a delicate bite, disregarding Lillian's gaze, which seemed to dissect his every action. The pancakes had a hint of chill, yet he hardly paid it any mind. Olivier smiled broadly. "Do you enjoy pancakes?" Andrew gave a slight nod. "Indeed. It's been some time since I last enjoyed them." The young lad inhaled sharply. "What's the reason behind that?" Andrew paused, aware that he lacked a response that wouldn't come off as absurd at this moment. "It seems I've been quite occupied." Olivier scowled. "Overwhelmed with tasks, pancakes will have to wait." Andrew cast a sidelong glance at Lillian, who seemed absorbed in her coffee, avoiding any engagement. He cast a glance back at Olivier. "Overwhelmed with numerous commitments." The words lingered in the air for a brief moment, yet Olivier chose not to linger on them. He returned to his meal, appearing satisfied that his pancakes were now being enjoyed by others. Lillian at last found her voice. "I'm unsure about your intentions in this situation, Andrew." He locked eyes with her. "I desire moments with my son." She let out a breath. "It's more complex than that." "It is to me," he stated with conviction. "I wish to avoid causing any upheaval in his life. I wish to avoid any confusion for him. However, I refuse to turn my back." Lillian gazed at him for an extended moment, as though assessing his words, searching for any flaws within them. At last, she let out a deep breath. "Let's take our time to ease into this." Brief encounters. Moments shared. "I won't push him into anything he's not prepared for." Andrew gave a slight nod. "That seems reasonable." Olivier glanced back and forth between them, then tilted his head thoughtfully. "Does this imply that you'll be present more often?" Andrew felt a constriction in his throat. "Indeed, young one. Indeed, it does." The boy pondered this for a moment, then a smile spread across his face. "Understood." In an instant, the atmosphere in the room transformed. It hadn't vanished entirely, but it felt more subdued. Simpler. Lillian appeared uncertain, grappling with her decision, yet Andrew noticed a subtle glimmer of hope beginning to shine in her eyes. As Olivier excitedly shared his thoughts on his favorite cartoons and expressed his desire to learn how to ride a bike, Andrew had a moment of realization. This was not going to be a simple task. For the first time in his life, he felt a deep yearning to strive for something beyond mere success. Andrew had always been decisive. In the realm of business, in the art of decision-making, in every facet of his existence, he had consistently exuded confidence. Yet, as he stood before Lillian's apartment door, an unfamiliar sensation washed over him, uncertainty. A week had passed since their breakfast at the cafe, a week since Olivier had gazed up at him with those striking blue eyes and inquired if he intended to stay. Andrew fulfilled his commitment, showing up each day and gradually integrating into his son's daily life. Brief strolls to the park, leisurely afternoons at the cafe where Lillian was employed, and extended discussions about dinosaurs and superheroes. It was unfamiliar, peculiar, and daunting in ways he had not anticipated. Yet it also seemed. Indeed. Lillian had exercised caution. She remained nearby, never fully abandoning them, always within hearing distance, always observing. He grasped the concept. She was still contemplating whether she could place her trust in him, and if he would indeed keep his promises. Indeed, he was as well. Today felt unique. Today marked the first occasion when Lillian welcomed him into their home. Andrew rapped twice, adjusting his stance as he lingered in anticipation. The door creaked open moments later, revealing Lillian, her brown eyes meticulously examining his face as if she were weighing the merits of this encounter. She silently moved aside, granting him entry. The apartment, though compact, exuded a cozy warmth. Sunlight poured through the windows, enveloping the humble furnishings in a warm, golden glow. Several children's books lay haphazardly on the couch, while toy cars were arranged with meticulous order on the coffee table, suggesting that Olivier had arranged them with thoughtful care. It was a stark contrast to Andrew's familiar surroundings. His realm was polished, contemporary, crafted with intention. This space exuded a sense of warmth, resembling a home in a manner his penthouse never could. From the hallway, Olivier's voice echoed, vibrant and brimming with enthusiasm. "Mommy, is he here yet?" Lillian hardly had a moment to respond when Olivier burst into the living room, a broad smile lighting up his face. His golden locks clung to his forehead, still glistening from a recent bath, while he donned pajamas adorned with whimsical little rocket ships. He came to a sudden halt in front of Andrew, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "You came," he said, as if he had been holding on to the hope that Andrew might reconsider. Andrew lowered himself, aligning his gaze with the other. "I mentioned I would do that." Olivier's smile grew brighter, and in a spontaneous gesture, he took hold of Andrew's hand and pulled him toward the couch. "Take a look at my creation." Andrew allowed himself to be drawn along, taken aback by the ease with which it unfolded. He settled into his seat as Olivier ascended next to him, beaming as he gestured toward a vibrant assortment of blocks meticulously arranged on the coffee table. "It's a space station," Olivier elaborated, his tone brimming with enthusiasm. "For those who traverse the cosmos and the beings that inhabit it." Andrew examined it with the gravity it warranted. "It appears quite remarkable. I believe there's potential for additional astronauts." Olivier nodded with enthusiasm. "Indeed. We have the potential to create even more." Andrew grasped a handful of blocks, allowing the boy to guide their collaborative effort. Time seemed to blur, and eventually, Lillian took a seat opposite them, observing in silence. "You're quite adept with him," she remarked after a moment, her tone gentler than it had been. Andrew cast a fleeting look in her direction. "I am making an effort." She let out a breath, curling her legs beneath her on the couch. "He's still navigating through all of this." "I feel the same way." Andrew meticulously positioned a small block atop their expanding creation. "I understand. However, I have no intention of leaving, Lillian." She observed him intently, as though weighing the truth of her conviction. Olivier, unaware of the gravity of their discussion, looked at Andrew with wide eyes. "Shall we visit the park tomorrow?" Andrew acted without a moment's pause. Certainly. Lillian let out a soft sigh, yet a faint smile danced on her lips. Looks like I'll be enjoying a leisurely afternoon break. Andrew locked eyes with her. Alternatively, I could handle it on my own. Her expression changed in an instant, becoming cautious once more. It's premature for that. Andrew chose not to engage in a dispute. He decided not to exert any pressure. Then we all go, he stated plainly. Lillian eased a bit, as though comforted by the agreement. Olivier, however, had already progressed, lifting his space station and placing it meticulously on the table as if it were the most significant object in existence. Andrew found himself on an uncertain path, yet for the first time, he was free from the weight of future considerations. He was neither plotting nor anticipating the future. At last, he was just present. And it seemed just as it should be. The following afternoon, Andrew found himself in an unexpected scenario, standing in a park, clutching a juice box, and observing a 4-year-old darting around him with endless enthusiasm. He had navigated intense negotiations, fierce boardroom confrontations, and multi-million-dollar mergers, yet nothing could have equipped him for the challenge of keeping pace with a child who appeared to have endless energy. Olivier dashed across the playground, his joyous laughter echoing as he scaled the jungle gym with remarkable agility. His tiny hands clutched the bars firmly as he ascended, then he turned to wave at Andrew with a sense of pride. "Behold my elevation." Andrew nodded, squinting against the bright afternoon sun. "That's quite remarkable." Lillian, positioned a short distance away, emitted a gentle chuckle. "He ascends every surface. It seems as though he is completely unafraid." Andrew looked at her, picking up on the affectionate frustration in her tone. Today, she wore a casual outfit, her hair pulled back, exuding a sense of relaxation that was noticeably different from their earlier encounters. It was the first time he had encountered her beyond the confines of work, beyond the cafe, in an atmosphere that felt ordinary. "He inherited that from you," he remarked, observing as Olivier meticulously started his descent. Lillian raised an eyebrow. "Do you really believe that?" Andrew wore a sly grin. "You always faced challenges head-on." She let out a breath, her gaze drifting elsewhere. "That feels like ages ago." Andrew understood her implication. Their history was intricate. Once, they were utterly inseparable, and he had held the belief that she would forever remain at his side. Yet, at some point in the journey, ambition seized control, priorities realigned, and she departed, leaving no trace, no rationale. Up to this point. Olivier dashed back toward them, his cheeks aglow from the warmth, a broad smile lighting up his face. "I wish to take a ride on the swings." Andrew pointed to the vacant swings in the vicinity. "Let's proceed." Olivier took his hand firmly, and Andrew was surprised by the warmth that blossomed in his chest from such a straightforward, trusting action. He trailed the boy to the swings, hoisting him onto the seat before positioning himself behind him. "Are you prepared?" Olivier responded with enthusiasm. "Lift me up." Andrew let out a soft laugh. "Not excessively elevated. Your mother may have some strong feelings about this." Lillian let out a derisive snort from behind them. "That is indeed correct." Andrew propelled Olivier with a decisive shove, observing the boy soar ahead, his joyous laughter echoing around them. He pressed on, settling into a cadence, absorbing Olivier's musings about his beloved cartoons, his preferred treats, and the new sneakers he desired for their promise of speed. It felt peculiar. Though their acquaintance was brief, every moment spent with the boy felt instinctive, as if their connection had been destined from the very beginning. Eventually, Olivier eased his pace, shuffling his feet through the sand to bring the swing to a halt. He glanced at Andrew, curiosity etched across his face. "Greetings, sir." Andrew wore a sly grin. "Still referring to me as Mr., are you?" Olivier inclined his head. "How would you like me to address you?" Andrew paused, casting a fleeting look at Lillian. She observed them intently, yet remained silent. He cast a glance at Olivier, maintaining a calm tone. "Feel free to refer to me however you like, my friend." Olivier appeared to ponder it for an extended moment. With a subtle, assured nod, he flashed a grin. "All right, Andrew." Something within him contorted in an unforeseen manner. It wasn't a matter of rejection, he simply hadn't anticipated that Olivier would instantly refer to him as Dad. He still had to prove himself for that. Yet, when his son spoke his name, so effortlessly and with such ease, it felt like a significant moment. A modest yet significant stride. Andrew beamed. "Absolutely, my friend." Olivier leaped from the swing and grasped his hand. "I would like to have some ice cream. Is it possible for us to do that?" Andrew cast a fleeting look at Lillian, his eyes silently seeking her consent. She let out a sigh, yet a smile graced her lips. "Understood. However, no chocolate, it ends up all over the place." Olivier let out a deep, frustrated sigh. "Mother." Andrew chuckled, playfully tousling the boy's hair. "How about we grab some ice cream, my little friend?" As they strolled away from the swings, Olivier's tiny hand still clasped in his, Andrew came to a realization. For years, he had been convinced that success was defined by figures, by influence, by the next significant achievement. Yet, this moment, this bond, this deepening trust, seemed to hold greater significance than anything else. For the first time in his life, he found himself free from the burden of contemplating what lay ahead. He was just present. He felt an unwavering desire to remain exactly where he was. The sun was beginning its descent as they arrived at the quaint ice cream shop nestled at the street's corner. Olivier pulled on Andrew's hand, nearly bursting with enthusiasm as he glanced at the vibrant menu showcased on the glass counter. His blue eyes sparkled with excitement as he enthusiastically gestured towards the flavors, his enthusiasm seemingly boundless. "I want vanilla," Olivier declared, his face pressed against the glass. "Adorned with vibrant rainbow sprinkles." Andrew smirked, casting a sidelong glance at Lillian, who responded with an amused shake of her head and a soft sigh. "You always choose vanilla," she playfully remarked. Olivier faced her, his eyes widening in exaggerated disbelief. "It's simply the finest." Andrew let out a soft laugh as he approached the counter. "Vanilla adorned with a cascade of rainbow sprinkles, understood." He cast a fleeting look at Lillian. "What about you?" She paused, her arms gently folding across her chest. "I'm doing well." Andrew arched an eyebrow. "So, ice cream isn't your thing?" Lillian let out an exasperated sigh. "Certainly, I simply..." "Mommy has a fondness for strawberries," Olivier interjected with a sly smile. "Yet she never acquires it for her own sake." Andrew fixed her with a pointed gaze, anticipating a rebuttal, yet she merely sighed, casting a glance at her son before muttering, "Fine. Delightful strawberry." Shortly thereafter, they found themselves seated at a small metal table outdoors, the evening air refreshing yet enjoyable. Olivier was completely absorbed in his ice cream, joyfully savoring the melting swirls while his feet swung playfully beneath the chair. Andrew observed him for a brief moment before shifting his attention to Lillian. "It seems you weren't going to receive anything at all." She nonchalantly shrugged, savoring a delicate bite of her ice cream. "I typically don't give it much thought. It's really nothing to worry about." Andrew's brow furrowed ever so slightly. "If it's something you enjoy, then it is." Lillian's expression shifted, revealing a moment of surprise at the unexpected words. She gazed into her cup for a moment, then slowly shook her head. "It seems I've become accustomed to prioritizing him." Andrew cast a sidelong look at Olivier, who was meticulously arranging sprinkles on his spoon, savoring each one as he consumed them individually. He acknowledged it softly. "However, it doesn't imply that you aren't worthy of having things for yourself as well." Lillian gazed at him, a mystery lingering in her expression. He noticed the uncertainty, the long history of solitude, the subtle resilience that had propelled her forward. He understood that she acted in what she believed to be the best interest, even if he could never concur with her decision to keep Olivier away from him. "Why did you really leave?" he asked after a pause, maintaining a calm tone. "The truth is what I seek." Lillian took a deep breath, her grip on the spoon growing firmer. "I've already mentioned it," she said softly. "Fear gripped me. Your attention was entirely consumed by your professional pursuits, by the growth of your enterprise, and by matters that seemed disconnected from family life. I persuaded myself that sharing this with you would make you feel obligated, yet not truly engaged. I assumed you would just throw money at the situation, yet not genuinely wish to be involved in his life." Andrew's jaw tightened, yet he willed himself to maintain his composure. "You never afforded me an opportunity." She recoiled just a bit, a flicker of remorse evident in her gaze. "I understand." He let out a breath, his fingers brushing through his hair. "Do you really believe I wouldn't have desired him?" Lillian gave a slight shake of her head. "I was unaware, Andrew. I truly had no idea. By the moment I considered sharing it with you, far too much time had slipped away. I felt a sense of apprehension about your words and actions. I hoped Olivier wouldn't be just a secondary consideration in your life. He was worthy of so much more." Andrew gazed at her, and for the first time, he truly perceived her, not merely as the woman who had departed, nor just as the individual whose decision had caused him pain, but as a mother who had acted in what she believed to be the right way, despite the fact that it may have been misguided. He cast a quick look at Olivier, who was now cheerfully humming to himself while he adorned his ice cream with a colorful array of sprinkles. He had overlooked countless milestones, his initial steps, his first utterances, all the precious moments that define a child's journey. "I can't reclaim those years," he said at last, his voice softened. "However, I have no intention of leaving at this moment." Lillian observed him intently, her brown eyes scanning his features as if in search of something tangible to grasp. Gradually, she inclined her head in agreement. "I understand." It was not about forgiveness. It fell short of all his expectations. Yet, it marked the beginning. Olivier abruptly shifted his gaze toward them, oblivious to the weight of their discussion. "Are we able to indulge in ice cream once more tomorrow?" Andrew grinned, extending his hand to tousle the boy's hair playfully. "Are you looking to establish this as a regular practice?" Olivier smiled broadly. "Perhaps." Lillian chuckled gently, her head shaking in amusement. "Not every day, my dear." Olivier sulked for a moment before shifting his gaze to Andrew. "But you'll return, won't you?" Andrew acted without a moment's pause. "Absolutely, my friend. I will remain present." For the first time, he realized he truly meant it. A week had gone by since that night at the ice cream shop, and a change was in the air. Andrew demonstrated unwavering dedication, appearing daily and investing time with Olivier, affirming that he was genuinely present in their lives. Lillian remained vigilant, yet there were fleeting instances, subtle ones, where he could perceive the facade beginning to falter. Instances when her gaze shifted from doubt to a gentler warmth, hinting at a budding sense of trust. This evening, he found himself on Lillian's couch, observing as Olivier meticulously organized his toys into tidy rows across the floor. The young lad was eager to share his collection of action figures with Andrew, passionately detailing which ones represented heroes and which ones were the villains. Andrew tuned in, truly engaged, allowing Olivier to elaborate on fantastical skirmishes and covert operations. Lillian glided through the kitchen, her movements soft and deliberate as she prepared the tea. For the first time, she had lowered her defenses enough to allow him to remain this long. Typically, she crafted a reason to conclude their gatherings prematurely, consistently maintaining a sense of order. Yet this evening, she had not hurried him away. That seemed like a step forward. Olivier abruptly pivoted, his head tilting in a gesture of curiosity. "Do you own a home?" Andrew gave a slight nod. Absolutely, I do. Is it large? Andrew wore a sly grin. Somewhat. Olivier's brow knitted in contemplation. Does it feel isolating? The inquiry took Andrew by surprise. He couldn't quite pinpoint the reason, yet it happened. He had never thought of his home as desolate before. It exuded elegance, embraced contemporary aesthetics, and showcased impeccable craftsmanship. It served its purpose well, operating with precision. Yet, warmth had always eluded it. At times, he confessed. Olivier nodded, as though it all aligned seamlessly in his mind. Consider acquiring a fish. Andrew arched an eyebrow. A fish? Indeed, Olivier remarked with a serious tone. Silently present, they offer a comforting presence. Lillian's soft laughter drifted in from the kitchen. He has an intense fascination with fish. Olivier faced her, his arms crossed defiantly. Because they are impressive. Andrew let out a soft laugh. Very well, you've swayed my opinion. Perhaps I shall acquire one. Olivier smiled broadly. May I assist in choosing it? Andrew gave a slight nod. Absolutely. The boy wore a satisfied expression, as though he had just made the most significant choice imaginable. He returned to his toys, satisfied, while Andrew observed him, still in disbelief over how much he had overlooked. Lillian approached him, offering a steaming mug of tea. I can hardly wrap my head around the idea of you thinking about bringing a pet into your life. Andrew wore a sly grin. Changes are inevitable. She settled into her seat opposite him, releasing a gentle breath. Indeed. Indeed, they do. In that fleeting moment, silence enveloped them both. The weight of unspoken memories hung in the air, a palpable presence that neither could ignore. Unspoken words lingered between them, and scars remained unhealed. Yet there was an essence to this moment that seemed distinct. Lillian placed her mug on the table, her gaze fixed on him with intense scrutiny. It seems like you have a strong desire for this, don't you? Andrew locked eyes with her, his voice steady and unwavering. Above all else. She observed him intently, looking for any signs of weakness or uncertainty, yet she found none. Gradually, she inclined her head in agreement. Very well, she replied gently. Andrew was uncertain about the exact meaning, yet he was certain of one thing. It surpassed anything she had offered him in the past. And that sufficed. At this moment, Andrew was unaware of the extent to which his life had transformed until a serene evening unfolded, revealing him seated on the floor of Lillian's living room, assisting Olivier in constructing a racetrack for his toy cars. Only a few weeks prior, his days were consumed by an unrelenting schedule of meetings, deadlines, and the perpetual pursuit of achievement. Yet, here he found himself, fully engaged in the delightful task of arranging miniature ramps and loops, as Olivier animatedly detailed the rules of his fantastical race. All right, this one is the quickest, Olivier remarked, lifting a red car. However, this particular one, the blue one he chose, excels at jumping. Andrew acknowledged with a solemn nod. That's a compelling approach. Are we in a competition? Olivier smiled broadly. Indeed. However, it's essential to choose a quality vehicle. Definitely not a sluggish one. Andrew feigned deep contemplation before selecting a stylish black car. What do you think of this one? Olivier scrutinized it carefully, then nodded in satisfaction. That's quite clever. However, mine is still destined to triumph. Andrew wore a sly grin. We'll find out soon enough. Lillian lounged on the couch, observing them with an expression that left Andrew puzzled. It had transformed beyond mere hesitation, not quite that anymore. It was a gentler feeling, one that leaned more towards acceptance. She had been allowing him to enter her world, piece by piece, yet he sensed her lingering caution. He grasped the concept. Trust takes time to develop, and he had lost out on years of their shared experiences. He couldn't simply assume she would let that go. As they prepared their vehicles, Olivier abruptly faced Andrew, posing a question that caused him to hesitate. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Andrew acted without a moment's pause. "Absolutely, my friend. I shall." Olivier smiled, pleased with the response, and returned to aligning his car at the starting line. Andrew cast a fleeting look at Lillian. She continued to observe him, and this time, when their gazes locked, she held her ground. Later that night, once Olivier had drifted off to sleep, Andrew assisted Lillian in tidying up the living room. The silence enveloped the space, a serene and cozy stillness that seemed to belong there. Lillian at last found her voice. "He's starting to form a bond with you." Andrew placed the toy car aside, pivoting to meet her gaze completely. "I desire for him to. I wish to support him in any way I can." She let out a breath, her fingers gliding through her hair. "It continues to frighten me." He gave a slight nod. "I understand. But I have no intention of leaving, Lillian." She gazed at him for an extended moment before letting out a sigh. "I'm beginning to embrace that notion." Andrew sensed a release deep within his chest. It was not a commitment. It fell short of all his desires. Yet, it held significance. As he departed that evening, he was certain of one thing. This transcended mere compensation for time that had slipped away. This was about constructing a future, one he would never abandon again. The conclusion of this narrative transcends mere resolution, it stands as a tribute to personal evolution, atonement, and the strength found in new beginnings. Andrew begins as a man driven by ambition, convinced that his life is fulfilled until he uncovers a reality he never realized was there. The gradual nature of his transformation adds depth and significance to the journey. He doesn't merely hold the title of father, he cultivates it, one small moment at a time. Lillian's journey is equally compelling. She transcends the role of mere obstacle or love interest, she embodies a mother who acted from a place of fear and the instinct for self-preservation. Her uncertainty stems not from a desire to punish Andrew, but from a need to safeguard her son. Observing her gradually lower her defenses, not merely for Olivier but for herself, enriches the narrative. She discovers that she no longer needs to bear the weight by herself, that placing her trust in Andrew doesn't equate to relinquishing control, but rather to embracing a partnership. At the core of everything lies Olivier, the pure spirit who unites them all. The trust he holds, the curiosity that drives him, and his pure belief in love illuminate the narrative beautifully. He doesn't require elaborate displays, what he seeks is simply presence, reliability, and the subtle comfort of knowing that Andrew will remain steadfast. The instant he inquires, "Will you return tomorrow?" and Andrew responds without a moment's pause carries more weight than any grand proclamation. This conclusion isn't focused on flawlessness. It doesn't tie everything together perfectly because reality isn't so straightforward. It's a journey of renewal, a process of rebuilding trust, and an understanding that the essence of family is shaped not by history but by the decisions we embrace as we look ahead. And what's truly enchanting about it? Andrew is not contemplating the future of his career, his financial status, or the mark he will leave behind. He contemplates Olivier. Concerning presence. And that, above all, demonstrates the extent of his transformation.